The year 1980 held great promise for the residents of the USSR, especially with the upcoming Summer Olympics scheduled to take place in Moscow during the summer. A sense of joyful excitement and anticipation permeated the air as the nation prepared for the festivities. To ensure the safety of the capital, unprecedented security measures were implemented. However, these measures weren't solely focused on maintaining order during the pivotal sporting event that occurred every 4 years. For the past year, a notorious maniac had been wreaking havoc across the Union, prompting authorities to spare no effort in apprehending this dangerous individual. Car number 7. On July 4, 1980, the Kharkov-Moscow long-distance train came to a halt at Kursk railway station. Passengers eagerly waited on the platform for the doors to open, but as time ticked by, there was no sign of the conductors responsible for allowing entry. As the departure time approached, the growing crowd on the platform remained stranded, unable to board the train. Frustration led passengers from car No. 7 to take matters into their own hands by knocking on the doors. With no response, they decided to open the doors themselves, only to be confronted by a horrifying scene reminiscent of a horror movie. Within the car, the walls, floor, and even the ceiling were smeared with a mysterious red substance. It was evident that something dreadful had occurred. Determined to find any possible survivors, passengers systematically checked each compartment. The lone survivor, electrician Alexander Prelutsky, was discovered sound asleep amidst the unsettling aftermath. 4 women. The police swiftly responded to the incident, identifying the expected occupants of the carriage. Apart from the electrician, there were supposed to be 4 women, 2 passengers, Tatyana Kolesnikova and Maria Lopatkina, and 2 conductors, Zizialina and Derivienko, yet none of them were present. Prelutsky was brought to the police department, regarded not necessarily as a suspect, but as a potential witness who should have been aware of something unusual. However, during questioning, he claimed ignorance regarding the nightmarish events on the train. He asserted that, due to his inebriation, he had seen and heard nothing, having slept through the entire journey in an unoccupied compartment. The electrician's account raised doubts, to say the least. The evidence at the crime scene suggested that the perpetrator couldn't have carried out such a gruesome act in complete silence without attracting attention. Suspect. The missing women's bodies were discovered on the same day, discarded near Orel between the Steel Horse and Stanovoy Kalida stations. The perpetrator had thrown them out of a window, subjecting them to gruesome acts and subsequently robbing them, as indicated by the case materials. The police grappled with numerous unanswered questions. Who was the perpetrator? Did they act alone or with an accomplice? How did they gain access to the train, and what was their escape route? Most crucially, where should the authorities begin the search for the suspect? Electrician Prelutsky emerged as the primary suspect. Being the sole male presence on the train, his alibi raised doubts. Furthermore, traces of blood were discovered on his boots, although some sources contested the authenticity of this evidence. Despite Alexander's persistent claims of innocence, he was nonetheless apprehended. Interrogations. The urgency was clear. The Olympic Games were set to commence in Moscow in just 2 weeks. Law enforcement authorities were under pressure to identify a culpable individual, or at least a suspect. Initially, there were suspicions within the authorities that the crime might be an intricately contrived scheme designed to tarnish the reputation of the USSR in the eyes of the international community, potentially signaling the start of a series of such incidents. Meanwhile, Prelutsky underwent interrogation, though not without bias. Despite vehemently maintaining his innocence in the murder of the women, the pressure mounted. Eventually, he was conveyed the message that revealing the truth was in his best interest, or else he risked imprisonment for a crime he did not commit. Under this pressure, Alexander Perlutsky began to provide testimony. I don't touch men. Perlutsky confessed that on that fateful night in the train carriage, he had indeed encountered the actual perpetrator and witnessed the crime unfold. Gripped by fear for his own life, he retreated to his compartment without intervening. The killer peered into my compartment at night with a knife in hand and said, "I mess with women like chickens, but I don't touch men," recounted the electrician during his testimony. Terrified, Perlutsky resorted to calming his nerves by reaching for a bottle and consuming its contents. Throughout the night, he remained on edge, eventually succumbing to sleep with the persistent fear that the murderer might return to harm him. The identity of this unknown assailant and the manner in which he infiltrated the carriage raised pressing questions. It was revealed that conductors seeking extra income occasionally allowed stowaways into the carriages for a modest fee. However, determining the stowaways' identities or pinpointing where they boarded or disembarked proved to be an insurmountable challenge. Hunt for the criminal. The police reached out to the families of the deceased women, asking them to provide descriptions of the stolen jewelry. These details were then disseminated to pawn shops, known as commission shops at the time across the country. All that remained was to await any leads. After some time, a proprietor from one of these establishments contacted the police, reporting an individual attempting to pawn a gold ring resembling the descriptions provided. A rapid response from an operative group followed, resulting in the arrest of Grigory Dugin. Dugin possessed an extensive criminal record, having been incarcerated multiple times. Despite his history, he vehemently denied any involvement in the murders associated with the recovered ring. Instead, he asserted that the ring was given to him by his fellow inmate and good friend, Anatoly Nagiyev, during their time in jail together. Circus performer. Anatoly Nagiyev, born in 1958 in the city of Angarsk, Irkutsk region, had a challenging childhood. Tolya was a rebellious child, frequently running away from home, wandering aimlessly, and showing little interest in academics. Disliking the dullness and routine of provincial life, he struggled to make friends as his peers were wary of his tendency to resolve even minor conflicts with physical confrontations. From a young age, Anatoly harbored a dream of becoming a circus performer. He dedicated himself to rigorous training, focusing on building muscle strength and flexibility. Through self-discipline and daily efforts, he managed to attain remarkable physical prowess and agility. Despite his modest height, 157 centimeters at the age of 17, nobody in the neighborhood dared to challenge the circus man. However, Anatoly faced difficulties in his relationships with the opposite sex. Despite pursuing one girl after another, he encountered rejection due to his stature. This constant rejection led Nagiyev to develop an inferiority complex, ultimately resulting in tragic consequences. Beginning. His first crime Anatoly committed at the age of 17. Having failed to achieve reciprocity from another girl, whom he tried to hit on, the young man forced her to intimacy. Alas, she did not go to the police because Nagiyev promised to revenge. As a result, he evaded consequences and developed a sense of impunity. A month later, he repeated the crime and continued this pattern. The third victim, despite feeling fear, mustered the courage to report the incidents to the police. Consequently, Nagiyev received a 6-year prison sentence, and was assigned to a high-security correctional facility. On his initial day in prison, his fellow inmates contemplated subjecting Nagiyev to the same treatment he had inflicted upon his victims. At first glance, the diminutive 18-year-old seemed defenseless against a group of maturing prisoners. Mad. Much to everyone's surprise, when Nagiyev found himself surrounded by cellmates in a tight circle, he transformed into a ferocious force, scattering 7 robust men. Since that remarkable display, no one dared to lay a hand on him. This and several similar incidents earned Anatoly the nickname Mad. Contrary to his moniker, Tolya maintained extremely respectful behavior with the prison guards. Over time, he developed positive relationships with both fellow inmates and the prison authorities, leaving a favorable impression. Some even speculated that Nagiyev was on a path of correction, foreseeing a transformation into a decent citizen in the future. In 1979, Nagiyev was relocated to a settlement colony in the Komi Republic, providing prisoners the opportunity to work and earn a salary. There, he engaged in logging activities. Occasionally, convicts were released to Pokhora, a location reachable by train within 40 minutes. A stowaway. During these excursions, Anatoly began targeting his next victims, single women he randomly encountered at stations or on trains. While one theory suggests he chose those resembling a la Pugacheva, a fan-fueled fiction emerged later. In reality, it was a fabrication by the press. Nagiyev never purchased tickets. Instead, he consistently bribed conductors, leaving behind no trace of his presence. Despite his first murder in January 1979, Anatoly Nagiyev was convinced that authorities would soon apprehend him. To his surprise, nothing happened, and he remained unimplicated. Emboldened by what he perceived as success, he escalated his actions. 4 months later, during another journey, Anatoly propositioned his compartment mate, Daria Kravchenko, seeking privacy and companionship. When she rebuffed him, Nagiyev subjected her to the same fate as his previous victim, concealing her body in the luggage compartment. Although her discovery was swift, the killer had already fled the scene. It's alarming to note that Nagiyev could have been apprehended at that point if the train conductor had reported the stowaway whom she allowed into the carriage for a bribe to the police. Unfortunately, driven by the fear of losing her job, she chose silence. Little did she know that her silence would cost the lives of 2 colleagues and 2 other passengers. Movie mechanic. In November 1979, Nagiyev secured parole and returned to his hometown. Swiftly landing a position as a projectionist for a mobile movie unit, he found an ideal job for a criminal who preferred committing offenses on trains. Over the next 7 months, he traversed the entire country, perpetrating criminal acts against young women in various cities. The only source of contentment for him was the cessation of his killings. Unofficial reports suggested that he committed a minimum of 30 crimes within this relatively brief period. The culmination of his atrocities occurred during the murders on the Kharkiv-Moscow train. Hell of a ride. On July 4, 1980, as was his routine, he once again bribed the conductor and settled in the 7th car, where numerous seats were available. His attention was immediately drawn to Zizulina, the conductor who had allowed him entry. Without much thought, he propositioned her to lie down next to her. When the indignant conductor, Zizulina, rejected Tolik, it wounded him deeply. Reacting impulsively, he brandished a knife. The second conductor, Derivienko, hearing commotion in the compartment, went to investigate, inadvertently witnessing the murder and sharing the fate of her colleague. Subsequently, he sought out other potential witnesses. In the second compartment, he found Maria Lopakina, and in the sixth compartment, Tatiana Kolesnik. Despite the likelihood that the two women were unaware of the prior murders on the train, they were unable to escape. In the seventh compartment, Nagiyev encountered an electrician. The surprised railroader was horrified at the sight of the man wielding a knife. However, Nagiyev spared him, stating that he does not touch men. With that, he walked away, leaving the frightened Prelutsky unharmed. The search, realizing he would be pursued and likely swiftly identified, Mad made his way to Kursk and handed over his most distinctive ring to his fellow inmate, Grigory Dugin. Dugin bore a striking resemblance to him, and Nagiyev hoped that the police would suspect him. However, when Dugin was apprehended attempting to pawn the ring, he promptly implicated Mad. The search for Nagiyev was led by the Minister of Internal Affairs of the USSR, S.H. Chelikov. In Nagiyev's mother's apartment, investigators discovered a notebook containing the names and addresses of 319 people, including Alla Pugacheva. This contributed to the unfounded legend that he was targeting the famous singer. Despite the extensive list, Nagiyev's whereabouts remained unknown. During the interrogation, Tolik's mother suggested that her son had likely gone to Dnepropetrovsk to visit a girlfriend with whom he corresponded. As it turned out, she was correct. On September 12, 1980, Nagiyev was arrested. However, even then, his adventures did not conclude. Refusing to confess to the crimes, he was placed in the press hut with the most hardened prisoners, where Tolya suffered injuries. Later, during a transfer, he attempted to escape by performing a genuine circus trick. He broke the handcuffs, sprinted around, and leaped out of a window situated at a height of 2 meters. Ironically, 6 pre-trial detention center employees were playing chess just beneath the window at that moment. The result. In 1981, Anatoly Nagiyev received a death sentence. However, in July, while being transported to the execution site, Mad successfully escaped from the platform by leaping over the railroad tracks right in front of a diesel locomotive. 40 days later, he was apprehended in the Rostov region. Tolik had been hiding in a haystack, surviving by pilfering food from local residents. During his arrest, he resisted and sustained injuries, but managed to survive. Although Nagiyev had only been officially proven guilty of 6 incidents, he claimed responsibility for numerous additional murders. Despite this, the sentence was hastily executed on October 28, 1981, possibly due to concerns about another escape, or the belief that there was nothing more to substantiate. Thus concluded the life of 23-year-old Anatoly Nagiyev, later dubbed the Kursk Maniac, and also known as the Hunter for Pugacheva. Postscriptum. You might find it intriguing to learn the fate of the conductor who initially withheld the information that, for a bribe, she had allowed Nagiyev into the car in May 1979, where he later committed a murder. She only revealed this a year later, following the murders of her colleagues. The conductor promptly identified Nagiyev as an unfamiliar person, recalling his appearance distinctly. Surprisingly, she was not dismissed from her position. However, it's essential not to solely blame her, as her actions were driven not only by self-interest, but also by a genuine fear for her life. I hope you liked this story. Please don't forget to leave a comment sharing with your thoughts below. Give a thumbs up this video, and remember to hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more captivating stories. Thank you for joining us on this remarkable journey, and we'll see you in the next video.